I'm so excited to be talking to you all today. So, as I said in the beginning, my name's Evan Dean, and I'm a researcher at KUCDD, the Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities. And my research focuses mainly on the topic that we're talking about today, self-determination. And I apply these concepts to young adults and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including autism, focus mainly on employment and community participation right now. So I know some people said that they were interested in learning about perspectives, and to me, self-determination is a perspective that guides, I think, a lot of the topics that we're going to be talking about in this series. So I think it's a great place to start to talk about transition. And People are talking about resources too. At the end, I will share a slide that has a website you can go to for a lot more information on self-determination that we've developed here at KU. So in the next 30 minutes, 27 minutes, we're just going to kind of present self-determination as we define it, and how we and some interventions and some ways to support people to develop self-determination, and some of the research that we've done that describes just how important this topic is for transition age. So we're excited to be talking to you.
Just remember to mute yourself as we're going forward, so we don't hear the sounds of you moving papers, moving your computer, that sort of thing. Thank you.
So just quickly, the objectives, we're really just going to be working on defining self-determination, and then we'll provide some strategies that you can use to apply to people that you're serving. And we're not making money on this. So just want to be sure everybody knows. So as a way to kind of set the stage to talking about self-determination, we think it's important to really kind of describe what we mean by a social ecological model of disability, which is really about, traditional models of disability have kind of focused on the person and the person's impairment or their disability, focused a lot on what a person cannot do. So we can think about that in terms of personal incompetence. And what the social ecological model talks about is really that it's not just, it's not about the person. Instead, it's about what the person can do and wants to do. And that person is in an environment that can either support or inhibit that participation, or that person doing what it is that they want to do. So when we think about that together, we can think about the person interacting in an environment that is maybe supportive or not. And if it's not supportive, then our focus on intervention or support really changes to thinking about bridging that gap between the person, what they want to do, and the environment that they're in. And so we can kind of think about that in terms of a need for support, which is what we'll be, so we'll be using that term support today, and how can we support someone to develop self-determination. And then later on in the series, we'll be talking about supports for employment and sexuality and a lot of other things. But really what it's coming down to is really this interface between a person wanting to do things and in an environment that may or may not support that, and how can we bridge that gap. So related specifically to self-determination, when we define this term, we can really think about being self-determined as a means to acting or causing things to happen in your life. So I think this causing things to happen in your life is an important piece of this, because we're not talking about independence. We're not talking about if a person can do everything on their own. So a piece of self-determination may be understanding what it is you want to do and directing your supports or your family members, who could also be supports, or whoever, to help you get those things done. So it's not just you doing everything, being self-determined, but it's you having a direction in your life and making things happen in pursuit of those goals. So relatedly, we can talk about self-determined action as we define it in research. And self-determined action is really something that's initiated by the person. So a person is acting autonomously, and it's in service of the person's goals. So it's goal-oriented, and that's really kind of the place that we start. So self-determined action is goal-oriented and initiated by the person in pursuit of those goals. And then also that the action is enacted with the belief that change is going to occur. I have a goal and I'm going to act in this way that's going to lead me towards that goal. And I believe that the actions that I'm taking are going to move me in the right direction. Now, as we'll talk later, those actions may or may not move that person in the right goal. So there's a whole self-reflection piece to this, but it's that the beliefs that what the person is, they believe that they're moving in the direction that they want to do. So I hear an adult servant. Were you going to add something to that?
I was going to say a lot of students with learning disabilities and cognitive disabilities have the experience that they try to do things throughout their young elementary years or even into middle school, and what they try doesn't work. I'm a person with autism and I make an unsuccessful attempt at a social interaction, and eventually I stop believing that I'm a causal agent. I stop believing that I can make things happen for myself. So along with the cognitive piece of trying to understand how to be self-determined, there's people who've had practice being self-determined that hasn't worked out, and so it's important for people to learn that they can indeed be that causal agent.
Mm-hmm. Another key piece to this too, related to what Sean was saying, I think, is what we sometimes call the dignity of risk. Mm-hmm. And that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not achieve your goal, but having the support to really think through that and how you're going to adjust your plan or your goals in light of the outcome that you had is a piece to that. So, I think lots of times we really want people to be successful in everything that they do and maybe tend to over support a person in doing that. But so this is really about maybe backing off a little bit on that and supporting after the outcome to kind of reinterpret what happened. So we've talked a lot to people with disabilities about self-determination and what that means, and was going to share just a few things from people with disabilities about what self-determination means to them. So I like this: when I choose where to live, I like my job, I like what I do. I go to church, so going to church was important, have a family. So all these things are things that the person gets to choose and be a part of because they're important in their life. So advocating for myself and advocating for others too, if they need it. So advocacy is a piece of self-determination also. And I really like this quote: self-determination is being able to talk about what you want in your life and set goals and dreams for yourself. You have to go do something or you won't be anything at all. So I think that quote really kind of encompasses what we're talking about and why we're trying to promote self-determination in people with disabilities. So when we talk about self-determination overall, we also think about specific skills that are associated with self-determination. And these are kind of listed in somewhat of a developmental process around choice making, decision making, problem solving, goal setting, and things like that. So these are all things that people may need support on, and a lot of these things emerge over time, and they also emerge with opportunity to practice. A lot of the early research in self-determination showed that people who had more opportunity to make decisions for themselves developed a stronger sense of self-determination. So these are things that we can support, and we'll talk about that in a second. But really thinking about all these things too makes us think, how many of us would benefit from support in these areas also? So we talk about self-determination a lot in a disability context, but this is really a universal thing, that self-determination is something that we're all striving to enhance our skill with and to find support for. So in practice, we can think about ways that we can promote self-determination. And we'll be getting a lot of examples throughout the ECHO series in different areas where this can happen. But in general, we can think about 3 ways of promoting self-determination. One is that we can teach those skills associated with self-determination, those skills that we just listed, like choice making, decision making, goal setting, problem solving. And I'll introduce a model in a second that has been that's used a lot in education, and also we're beginning to use it a lot more in the community around career development to really teach these skills associated with self-determination. Next is providing opportunities, and we just talked about this a little bit, to use and practice these skills. And then finally, doing all these things in a supportive environment and providing the right amount of supports for a person to exercise self-determination. So again, that doesn't mean doing everything, but that a person is supported to do the things to move their life in the direction that they want to be moved. So why is promoting self-determination so important? People at KU have been studying self-determination for 20 years. And what they've found overall, and in increasingly larger studies, is 2 key things. One, that people with enhanced self-determination have greater academic achievement. So progress in the general education curriculum and also academic goal attainment. And then also we see a lot of this research has been done in schools, and then they follow people a couple of years after graduation. And what they find is that even after high school, people who have used some of these interventions and enhanced their self-determination have shown better outcomes related to post-secondary education and employment and community participation. So that's a really important thing that we're talking about. And so related to supporting self-determination, a lot of our work with families over the years has, people are always interested in really what is that right amount of support that we need to be offering. So we wanted to provide a couple of questions to kind of answer that, because it's a very individual thing, how much support needs to be offered to adequately support someone. And you all know the people that you're supporting much better than we do, so we can't really say you have to do this. But we think it's important to ask yourselves these questions. How many opportunities does a person have to make decisions? And would increasing that provide more opportunity to develop the skill? How much support does the person need to make a decision? And I think an important note on that is that the decision that they're making may not be the one that we want, but how much support do they need to make the decision that they want to make? Do they need more information about it? Do they need someone to help them think through what the consequences would be? But ultimately, it's their decision. And think about, how does the person learn best? How are they going to best receive the information if we need to give them information? Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
Oh, and it is important, that piece about environment is really important. A lot of times, sometimes our students don't have strong communication skills. And so we know behavior is communication, and that sometimes, our kids are making choices and showing us those choices through behavior. So it's really important to listen to, if a child's not verbally articulating why they do or don't want to do something, if their behaviors are indicating it, to listen to those behaviors and then measure and seek to address what the environment and some of the things that would support that child to be doing what they want to do, which then you're going to lessen those behaviors.
I think that's true. And one of the other things that I would like to point out, especially in the schools, is a lot of times, it's funny as you were talking, because on one of the slides you were talking about the skills that were needed in order to be able to become self-determined. And in schools often when we provide, and the level of support necessary. In the schools, sometimes what we do if we provide, or even in the community setting, if we provide too much support, we end up with somebody that we call prompt dependent, right? And if you're prompt dependent, then all you're doing is sitting there waiting for somebody else to tell you or show you or support you in what it is to do. And you're not making your own life decisions at that point, right? So the more that we can empower the people that we work with to be able to be as independent as possible with the right level of support, the more they're going to have a self-determined outcome.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's interesting, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning, but this whole idea of self-determination really came out of the deinstitutionalization movement back in the 70s and 80s, that people were coming out of situations where they were very over-supported, moving into communities with a lot less support, and really thinking through what is that adequate amount of support for people to really figure out what life they want to live.
The other important piece is that self-determination isn't about how well I can verbally communicate my choices. Self-determination applies across the spectrum of disability. So kids who are nonverbal, or kids who are minimally verbal, are making decisions, are making choices, and can be supported, especially with all the great technology we have, to do that. And so it's important to not just think self-determination is for our highly verbal kids or our kids who are functioning at that level. Yeah.
That's a really good point, that a lot of this could be, when we think about how does a person learn best and communicate best, how do we interpret that behavior, and how do, what are they really saying if they're not speaking?
And I want to say one more thing about that. And I think that what we're not saying is that on our second bullet point, like how much support does the person need to make a decision, even if it's not the decision we want them to make, that we're not talking about allowing the person to make decisions that are going to be harmful to them or going to put them at risk of institutionalization or incarceration, right? But that the support around that is that they can live independently and work towards their goals in having a productive, healthy life, right? So I think we need to, that it doesn't mean that we back off and let them make any kind of decision that they want, but that we're supporting them and helping them reach their goals in life.
I think that's a very good point. It's something that I've seen a lot in adult services, that someone may say, the person they're supporting is maybe pre-diabetic, but they go to the store and buy, a big tub of Coke every day. Like, well, it's a choice that they're making. They're being self-determined, so I can't say anything about it. When really we're looking at those longer-term goals that the person has for themselves. So I'm guessing progressing to diabetes is not the goal.
Right.
So really thinking about, if it is living a healthier lifestyle, having more energy, whatever it is, those are the goals. So then it becomes education about how that big tub of Coke fits into those longer-term goals.
Yeah.
And it is really important. Self-determination is not setting people up to fail. I've seen that as well, where as an excuse for, well, this setting didn't work out or this job didn't work out, and we were letting them make their own choices, and that's what happened. Well, but nobody did those first steps in the skill building. Nobody said, what skills does that person need? Nobody gave people opportunities to practice. Nobody gave people information or training, and nobody built in some scaffolds of support that can help that person be successful. So self-determination and isn't just letting things go. It is building that system of supports around a person, including them learning a set of skills.
Mm-hmm.
A planned course of action
Yes.
versus just turning people loose.
Yeah. I know, I think it's the next session we're talking a lot more about employment, right? So I'm not going to go too much into employment, but just wanted to kind of situate employment with self-determination a little bit, that a lot of the predictors after high school related to integrated employment, self-determination is one of them that's at the top of the list, and we talked about that a little bit ago. And I use this as a way to kind of introduce the model related to career development and career design that we use. But really also, along with self-determination, is really these opportunities to develop work-related habits and skills and things like that through things like chores around home, having an expectation of having a job, which can lead to more chores, volunteer experiences, taking responsibility, and a history of work being the other key one. So the model that's been developed at KU was originally used in schools for related to setting goals for academic achievement for students. And it's still used as, it's an evidence-based practice in education to use this, and we're beginning to use it more and more in the community related to career design and career development. So the process that we use leads people through 3 phases. And the idea is that this process is used repeatedly as a way to move people closer to their career goals. And through doing that, we're really trying to teach these goal setting and action planning processes that a person can then use in their life in other ways. So the first thing that we ask is, what is my goal? We have the person set a goal to really think about what it is that they want to do. So there's a 4-step problem-solving sequence that we won't go through in depth. I'll show a website at the end where you can find out a whole lot more information about this. And also, I'm more than happy to talk with anybody that's interested in exploring this model more. So you start with setting a goal. Then you put an action plan together to achieve that goal. And so that's another 4-step sequence, really thinking through what do I know about this? What strengths and skills do I have to apply to this goal? Where might I need support, and how am I going to recruit those supports? And then enacting the action plan related to that. And then after all that, what we talked about earlier is adjusting that plan based on the outcome. So just kind of quickly to think about how that goes through. A person that I've worked with wanted to become a nail technician and go to cosmetology school. Cosmetology, right? I got that right. Yeah. Cosmetology school. And so set a goal to passing the entrance exam to cosmetology school, which we had found out requires a lot of anatomy and physiology and chemistry background knowledge. So she put a plan in place to study the material and figure out what support she would need to be successful with that. And through taking that practice exam, what she realized is that it was going to take her, she hadn't had exposure to a lot of that material, and it was going to take her a lot longer to develop the content knowledge that she needed, and she wanted a job faster. So through the self-reflection phase, we really thought about, okay, this might not be the direction you want to go now, but what really was it about that process or about that job that you liked? And it turned out that she didn't have a whole lot of social support in the day program that she was in, except once a week when all of the girls got together and did their nails together. And she really liked that one-on-one interaction with people. So through that, we were able to think through to set a different goal around how can I get a job where there is a lot of one-on-one interaction with people, which opened up for her to a whole lot more possibilities of jobs that she could do. So that's just an example of how we worked through that and then continued to work through that until she eventually found a job as a receptionist in an office that provided a lot of those opportunities that she was very happy with. So I'm going to skip a little bit about this, but we're really just thinking through we're really focused on the teaching these models of self-determination and providing opportunities for making decisions, setting goals, and putting action plans in place. So that's most of what we had to present. The website here, self-determination.org, has a lot more information about an assessment that's available to assess self-determination, measure self-determination, which can kind of also help put a plan in place for supporting someone. And then there's a lot of information about the self-determined model that we've talked about also. Really appreciate everybody's time. I know this was a really quick introduction, but you'll be hearing more about these concepts as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You all did such a nice job with that. So typically, this would be the point in the session where we would do a case presentation from one of you. So I wanted to put a plug in there that if anyone has a burning question or a person they're working with that they would like to present to our panel in the upcoming weeks, to please think about that. Let us know. You can email me at sbellinger, SBELLINGER, @kunc.edu. And I can help you fill out, we have a little case presentation form that gets all the important information, and we can kind of talk through how to prepare so that you can share that case with not only our panel, but all of your peers and colleagues all across the state. So please just consider that. That's a really, really exciting part about ECHO, is that you can present your own cases and get some ideas from everybody that has some really great knowledge and experience, and people that might have similar situations. So please think about that for future sessions. For this session, we did put together an example of what that might look like. I don't know if it's on.
I think it's on the slides.
Is it on that one?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So we made an example of Mateo, and this is not his real name because we're respecting HIPAA. So I don't know if you want to talk about this case and kind of model how that might look. We have about 15 minutes to kind of talk through this, and also get some, if you guys have any burning questions out there as well. And then we do have some time after the formal session ends at 1 to do additional conversation and discussion, because we always felt like there wasn't enough time for that. So, we'll try to get through most of it by 1. And then if you guys want to stay on after that to ask more questions or discuss more, that would be great. So I'm going to get started with Mateo.
Yeah. And I'll just kind of briefly introduce, this is a person that I supported through the self-determination stuff, and Skylar also supported with some other things. So when he came to me, the chief concern was that Mateo wanted to attend college, but he struggled, not academically, but struggled with the social complexities of high school, and ended up dropping out of high school. But he was also a kid who read college textbooks. Paleontology was his area of interest, and he was reading college textbooks and actually talking with college professors on chat rooms and things related to his interest in that. And he knew he wanted to go to college to study under some of these people, but graduating from high school was a current barrier for him to doing that. So thinking about his transition interest, it really was getting to college, going to college. As I said, he read the textbooks. He understood a lot of the material. but he was also a first generation college student and didn't understand how to navigate a college website or thinking about entrance qualifications or how to go about finding a college. So those were some of the things that he was interested in working on. So our plan for working together was really focused on.
Can I just jump in really quickly?
Sure, yeah.
So that's definitely kind of that career or goal or education goal piece. But as far as kind of adding in some of the medical piece, he was diagnosed with autism, also ADHD, and so some of that, along with anxiety, was managed with medication and also some cognitive behavioral therapy, individual therapy. And then to kind of add just an interesting piece to this case, Mateo was really struggling with his gender, and there was, kind of some, pretty strong feelings that he was transgender, and so that was another thing that we were working through as well, is like kind of how does that all fit in, kind of getting hooked up with the Gender Pathways Clinic at Children's Mercy, and then he turned 18, so that didn't apply anymore. So moving to, what are the other resources in the community for that? There's a lot of research going on right now and evidence to show, and I know our next presenters are going to talk about this, but the incidence of transgender and gender-related issues in autism spectrum disorder seems to be much higher than the general population. So just putting that really complicates things. I think that not feeling confident with the gender that his body was that he was placed into really made the other things harder for him to be able to kind of feel good about himself enough to move towards these other goals as well. So there was multiple goals of transitioning genders and also transitioning into college and career.
Yeah. And from my perspective, like all of that was, I didn't even know that a lot of that was going on, but for me, it was important to kind of create an accepting environment that whatever of that he wanted to talk about or was going through, that it mattered to me that he was struggling, but none of it really mattered to me as far as our work together. Like, he still had a strong interest in where he wanted to go, and I was there to support him doing that in ways that I could. So I think creating that accepting environment, knowing that students are going through a lot more than we think they are, is an important piece to this also. So the plan that we put together for the transition related stuff was really that, if he wanted to go to college, he needed to finish high school or get a GED. So at the time, the GED was the better option for him, and so we kind of started working on some of those things. At the same time, we set in goals to really think about where it was he wanted to go to school, and looking around at college entrance requirements and things like that. So the thing, I talked to him a lot through the process and afterwards too about really what was it that was useful for him out of the process. And the thing that he really took away from it was the second part of our plan here, really strategies to break down larger goals into actionable steps. So he was someone, we kind of see this on different areas. He was someone who could set goals. He knew exactly what he wanted to do and didn't need much support in doing that, but figuring out how to make those longer term goals a reality and breaking some of those steps down is where he needed more support. So the model that we used was nice, and that we could teach him a strategy for doing that. And he talked about how we were using those, and he was starting to apply those to other parts of his life to kind of think through that. So so that was just a really nice way of doing that.